As we witnessed at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo was frozen in carbonite by Darth Vader and gifted to Boba Fett to deliver to Jabba the Hutt. But while in transit to Tatooine, Boba noticed that something was wrong with his prisoner, seeing that the carbonite was melting and that Solo would not survive the trip. Knowing that Jabba would be angry if his prize was damaged, Boba took Solo to the smuggler's moon Nar Shaddaa, where he enlisted the help of a basilisk by the name of Doc Raygon to reverse the effects. The Doc assured Boba that he could save Solo's life, but that his services wouldn't come cheap. Not being particularly high on funds at the moment, Boba assured Raygon that once he collected the bounty on Solo, he would have more than enough credits to pay, but the good doctor refused to accept an IOU. Instead, he commissioned Fett to assassinate a pit fighter named Worman Lichter, who once cost Raygon a fortune, but because she was protected by Narkanji, he was unable to touch her. Boba agreed to kill Lichter in exchange for the Doc's services, entering himself in the Kanji pit fights under the name Django. But once he completed his job and returned to Raygon's, he discovered the basilisk's lifeless corpse, with Solo now missing. Meanwhile, Jabba had continued to grow impatient and eventually decided that the reason it was taking Fett so long to reach Tatooine had to be because he had betrayed the Hutt and sold Han off to a higher bidder. So he placed a bounty on Boba Fett's head, which the bounty hunter would discover as he was departing Nar Shaddaa and was attacked by the bounty hunters Forlom and Zuckuss. Boba was able to defeat the pair, and after removing Forlom's head from the rest of his body, he interrogated the droid, demanding to know why they attacked him. The droid explained that it had been Jabba who had placed the bounty on his head, and so Fett traveled to Tatooine to confront the Hutt crime lord. When he arrived, he was greeted by Bib Fortuna, who explained to Fett that Jabba had left Tatooine to attend an auction led by the group called Crimson Dawn, who had not been seen or heard from in many years. Apparently, it had been Crimson Dawn, now led by Lady Kira, who had stolen Solo from Fett and was now bidding him off to every crime syndicate in the galaxy. As all of this was happening, Luke and Chewbacca received word from a contact on Nar Shaddaa, who turned out to be Sagwa, the Wookiee who Chewie and Han had helped liberate on Kessel during the events of Solo, that Boba Fett had been sighted on the moon. They immediately departed for Nar Shaddaa, where shortly after arrival, they ran into bounty hunters Dengar and Bylert Valance. The bounty hunter pair had actually also been looking for Boba Fett, but what Chewie didn't know was that Valance intended to rescue Solo from captivity, as he remembered Han from their days in the Imperial Flight Academy together, where Han had once saved his life. After a brief scuffle with the Wookiee, he managed to convey his intentions to Chewie, who in turn told him that if he truly wanted to help Han, then he would stay out of their way. Valance and Dengar would eventually come upon the information that Solo had been stolen by Crimson Dawn after a run-in with an assassin called Deathstick, who worked directly for Kira. And after escaping her, they began making their way to the auction for Han Solo. Chewie and Luke rendezvoused with Sagwa, who explained to them that a warrior with similar armor to Boba, using the name Django, had recently killed the reigning champion of the Narkanji gladiator fighters. They, however, were unable to get much more information before gang members of Narkanji attacked them and chased them off-world. Despite returning to the rebel fleet having failed, Luke and Chewie were met with good news from Leia that a contact of hers, Amilyn Holdo, had sent word to her about the auction on Jakara and said that they were going to crash it. She, Chewie, Lando, and C-3PO departed for the auction, while Luke went on a quick mission for the Alliance, promising he'd meet them there later. Meanwhile, Darth Vader, who had just faced trials of the Sith that fueled his hate anew, set out on a new path. No longer wanting his son to join him on the dark side, he had resolved instead to just kill him for being weak. To do so, he intended to retrieve the carbon-frozen Han Solo from Jabba and use him as bait for Skywalker. He partnered with a Hutt named Boku, and after a brief run-in with IG-88, they learned about the auction themselves. After the droid nearly killed Vader by overtaking control of his suit, Vader realized that IG-88 had been hired to kill him by Sly Moore, and confronted her back on Coruscant. Instead of killing her, he told her that she would go to the auction and bid for Han Solo, as a representative of the Empire. When Boba Fett arrived on Jakara, he immediately was attacked by Bossk, who intended to collect a bounty on his head. The fight ended swiftly with Boba as the victor, and he left Bossk tied to a rock, heading inside Kira's flagship, the Vermilion, where Kira began the bid for Han. Jabba ultimately won the bid at 1 million credits, which Fett noted was far more than the Hutt had ever intended to pay him. But before the bounty hunter could take back possession of Solo, he ran into the rebel team and got into a fight with Chewbacca, who ended up being set on fire before Lando quickly put him out with his cape. Meanwhile, Darth Vader arrived at the auction proclaiming that Han Solo was property of the Empire, no matter who won the auction. And after he threatened to remove the Hutt's long-standing favor with the Emperor, Jabba conceded to Vader's wishes and handed Han over to the Sith Lord. But before Vader could take Solo, Kira engaged him in a duel, holding her own so well that Vader took note of her skill, surmising that she must have been trained by someone very powerful in the dark side. But ultimately, she was no match for Vader. Before the Sith could finish her her off, however, he was distracted momentarily when he sensed the presence of Luke, who had just entered the atmosphere to join the fray. From above, Admiral Piet was able to patch into Luke's comms so that Vader could speak with him directly, and he threatened to kill Solo if Skywalker did not turn himself over. Luke realized that he was still not ready to face Vader after losing so badly on Cloud City, but he also called the Dark Lord's bluff, knowing that Vader wouldn't kill someone as valuable to the Empire as Han, even to bait Luke. Evidently, his assumption was correct, and Vader had the frozen Han loaded onto an Imperial shuttle to be taken to the Star Destroyer orbiting above, before taking to the skies to chase Luke. Outside, Boba went to retrieve Solo from the stormtroopers before they could make it to the shuttle, but was stopped when Dengar and Valance attacked him. He was unable to get to Han in time, but trapped Dengar on a floating chunk of ice and struck a deal with Valance to work together in order to recover Solo. Valance was willing to betray Dengar because ultimately, Dengar's only goal was to collect the bounty on Fett, something about which he cared very little. The rebels also holed up in the Falcon to chase after the Imperial shuttle, which they were able to decommission the controls of by using Lobot's implants, but soon got a taste of their own medicine when Boba Fett did the same to their own ship. But before he and Valance could reach the shuttle, a swarm of Hutt ships got in their way, because Boku's pride had been wounded when Vader took Solo, and he decided to go against Jabba's wishes to get him back. Because of this, Admiral Piet contacted the Emperor, who personally ordered Vader to abandon pursuit of Skywalker to deal with the Hutts, and the Sith Lord reluctantly obeyed. He slaughtered the entire Hutt council, and before killing Boku, the Hutt revealed that he had been a secret operative of Crimson Dawn since the beginning. Lando was able to get the Falcon operational again after having a moment to talk to L3, and the rebels were allowed onto the Star Destroyer by an Imperial who was another secret operative of Crimson Dawn. Meanwhile, Boba and Valance infiltrated the Star Destroyer as well, but Fett ultimately betrayed the other bounty hunter, shooting him with lasers so powerful that they could kill a normal man, though not quite a cyborg. The rebels managed to get so close to Han that they could touch him before Boba Fett shot the wall and Han was sucked out into the atmosphere and into Jakara's frozen waters. This caused Leia and Chewie to believe Solo was dead, but Boba fished him out, recovering his bounty and delivering him safely to Jabba on Tatooine, which is where we find him in Episode 6. Leia's belief that Han died was short-lived when, after all was said and done, the Falcon was boarded by none other than Kira, and the two talked about their mutual association to Han. She told Leia that it was always her intention that the rebels would end up getting Solo returned to them, but that Vader crashing the party had foiled her plans. She went on to inform them that Han was still alive and at Jabba's palace, and that if and when they attempted to rescue him, they would have the full aid of Crimson Dawn at their disposal. And that's the full story of how Boba Fett nearly lost Han, but ultimately got him back and delivered him to Jabba. If you'd like to read this story for yourself, you'll find it in War of the Bounty Hunters main comics, as well as Star Wars 2020, Vader 2020, Star Wars Bounty Hunters, and Dr. Aphra 2020. There are also several one-shot tie-in comics to War of the Bounty Hunters with content that I didn't cover due to irrelevance. Kira's story is currently being continued in the ongoing comic series Crimson Reign, which I look forward to covering in a later video. But for now, thanks for watching, and have a good day.